Greetings and salutations to all my rock and roll friends, my rock and roll peeps out there in podcast land. Welcome to the latest, greatest episode of the Fortress of Rock. I am your humble and gracious host, the Ayatollah of rock and roll, the Maestro, Kevin Cronin. And as always, I cannot express my gratitude, my thanks enough to you for listening in each and every Friday night for this extravaganza that we call the Fortress of Rock, where we celebrate. It's not even close. We celebrate the greatest music ever. Classic rock and roll, focusing on the 70s, the 80s, and the early 90s. And we have got a jam-packed Fortress of Rock for you this week, so let's get into it without hesitation. Segment 1, as always, is News of the World, our tribute, as you know, to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen. If you have not heard, Guns N' Roses has swapped out drummers. Now, is this a big deal? A lot of people in the rock and roll press out there in social media are making a big deal about this, but I'm sorry, to me, once you get past Steven Adler and Matt Sorum, whatever. Honestly. To me, GNR is Steven Adler and then Matt Sorum. That's who was drumming for Guns N' Roses in their most important years, their heyday. Have you been keeping track of their drummers since then? I sure haven't. But it turns out that Frank Ferrer was technically the longest tenured drummer ever in Guns N' Roses. He had been with the band for 19 years. Now, he has left Guns N' Roses supposedly amicably. I read his press release. I read the band's press release. Okay. Seems somewhat friendly. But you read between the lines, maybe a little bit of bitterness on his part about something. Who knows what? But GNR had to move quickly because they are going back out on the road again. Unfortunately, not here in the United States, but they have a lot of 2025 tour dates in other countries. So they had to find a drummer fairly quickly. And they settled on Isaac Carpenter. Now, Isaac Carpenter is familiar to diehard Guns N' Roses fans as he played in Duff McKagan's band Loaded a while back. He also has been playing in AWOL Nation. So it's not like he's somebody just coming in out of the blue to replace Frank Ferrer. Would have been kind of cool to see Matt Sorum come back. I don't know about Steven Adler. I know he's feeling better health-wise. He's been out there with his band playing Guns N' Roses music. But here's what we get. We get Isaac Carpenter. Once again, I will just say, okay. I think, again, the press is making a bigger deal about this than the rest of us really would. Is there new Van Halen on the horizon? Are we finally going to see archival music? Are we going to see stuff from the vault finally see the light of day? I am not hearing no. Now, I have seen the initial press release, the initial story that came out of a Dutch media source claiming that they had spoken with Alex Van Halen, and he said that he is indeed going through the archives with one Steve Lukather of Toto. Now that makes sense because Eddie Van Halen was extremely close and worked well with Steve Lukather over the years. Of course, in this day and age, people have got to go nutsy cuckoo crazy and run with the story and start adding in bits and pieces that really were not there. But the encouraging part of this for Van Halen fans like me, and hopefully you, is that when Steve Lukather was approached about this, he was very coy about it, did not deny that he and Alex have been working on archival material. Didn't necessarily confirm it, but definitely did not deny it. The one thing he did deny, and this is part of the problems with social media and the media in general in this day and age, Steve Lukather had to deny the ridiculous rumor that he was actually going to play guitar parts on any new Van Halen music that came out. Now, when I say new, I'm putting that in air quotes. Of course, this would not be new music. It would be previously unreleased music. And here's the thing. Everybody's arguing, everybody's fighting about artificial intelligence, AI, right? And of course, we don't want celebrity voices or the vocals of a cherished classic musician being usurped for different material for commercial purposes. But at the same time, if Alex Van Halen was to take, working in concert with Steve Lukather, to take a Van Halen, an Eddie Van Halen guitar snippet and loop it to form a song, and they were, let's bring in David Lee Roth and Wolfgang Van Halen to fill everything out. Would that be such a terrible thing as long as we're not creating new music based on Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing patterns? If we're just using his work and splicing it and repeating it, is that really all that much different than the work that's done or used to be done in the studio? But again, glad that Steve Lukather came out and told everybody, no, I am not playing guitar on any new Van Halen material that would come out down the road. But this is just great news in general, because you guys know I've been pining and whining ever since this podcast started for somebody to go through the archives. And I know Wolfgang Van Halen has got his own thing going on. I love Mammoth WVH, so I get it. I do. I would love to see him come back into the fold if they were to put together some kind of a project or an album. And I, of course, would love to see David Lee Roth come back. I don't think you'd ever see Sammy Hagar or Michael Anthony come back. Unfortunately, if you read Alex Van Halen's book, Brothers, you can kind of understand why I say that. I don't think he holds any animosity towards Michael Anthony, but I can definitely, again, reading between the lines, see where he does not acknowledge Sammy Hagar as the one true vocalist for Van Halen. That would be David Lee Roth. So we'll see what happens. I have a feeling this will be the last we discuss this for a while. This is just kind of a blip on the radar. Otherwise, probably going to be calm seas on the Van Halen front for a while. But you never know. You never know with Van Halen. We have new music coming from Styx. Awful, terrible that they were not nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. But they are still touring. They are still plugging along. They are still creating new music. Now, this project sounds a little odd. But Tommy Shaw recently talked about it. He admits he was concerned that the record label was not going to really be all in on this, because I guess this is a concept album. Wait for it. Based on a bird, particularly a starling. The album is called Circling from Above. I am not kidding on any of this, people. Circling from Above, while we don't have a firm release date yet. Supposedly the album is done. Again, Styx is going out on tour, so either it's done and it's coming out as they're promising in late May, or it's not going to come out for a while, because they're not going to have the time to put any finishing touches on it. But we have no reason to doubt Tommy Shaw. It's just a very interesting concept, let's put it that way. But we've seen Styx do this kind of stuff before. Of course, Kilroy was here, Mr. Roboto. We all know about that. So, once again, Circling from Above, coming out at some point in late May, at least according to Tommy Shaw. I would imagine we're going to get a new song from Styx here very, very soon. A little bit of music business talk, just for a second. Just for a second, because trust me, I've got more coming later, and then I'm going to get into being angry Maestro. This doesn't necessarily shock me or surprise me, but it will feed into my rant later on about the music business. For the first time ever in the United States, paid music subscriptions top 100 million. Kind of that, it doesn't surprise me, but it does. Are people that afraid of advertisements, that adverse to listening to a couple ads an hour, where they're willing to shell out their hard-earned money? See, it doesn't bother me. We've become lazy and we've become spoiled. I don't mind advertisements. And yes, I'm the guy that gets the bare bones plan on Netflix and any of the other streaming services, Paramount Plus, whatever it might be. I get the ads. It doesn't bother me. I can run to the bathroom, run to the kitchen, look at my phone. God help me. I don't want to be one of those people, but is it really, I mean, if you add it up, and a lot of people have a problem with this, a lot of people don't pay attention. That's why there's all these ads for these services that we will monitor your finances for you, and we will cancel your unwanted subscriptions. If I ever have that many subscriptions where I can't keep track, and I don't know when to cancel or when to pay a bill or when to extend a subscription, then I would consider myself lacking in mental capacity. I listen to Spotify. That's my platform of choice for music, and I listen to it with ads. And again, you get a couple ads every hour. It's not that bad. So to hear that there are 100 million plus paid music subscriptions in the U.S. just takes me aback a little bit. The overall number, a little overwhelming to me. And you guys know I'm not a Bob Dylan fan as we move along. But I keep talking about this movie because I think it's good for music in general. I love the music biopics, along with the music documentaries. Of course, last week we discussed Heartbreaker's Beach Party on Paramount Plus. Will I watch A Complete Unknown? Of course, A Complete Unknown, Timothée Chalamet playing Bob Dylan in his early years. Maybe. It is coming on Hulu. Speaking of streaming subscriptions, A Complete Unknown is going to hit Hulu this coming Thursday, March the 27th. So, in a few weeks, will I have a review of A Complete Unknown for you kids? We're going to discuss it more later because there's some good news coming when we get to wrap it up. And we're going to go back to structuring our schedule. We've been playing it loosey-goosey for a while now. We've got a lot of new albums on the horizon, finally. So now it's going to be a little bit more difficult to fit in some of these things. But we're going to discuss it more when we get to our final segment. If you're into Limp Bizkit, why? Sorry. Did I say that out loud? Fred Durst, of course, the frontman, the leader of Limp Bizkit, they're suing Universal Music Group. Shocking that one of the big labels out there, the big music management companies out there, is having issues with the talent because of all the years. And I will always side with the musicians on this, because more often than not, you do find out that whether it's the Universal Music Group or what, BMI or whoever it might be, BMI, Body Mass Index. No, sorry. That's something I need to worry about. Not the musicians out there, unless I guess you're Vince Neil. Ba-doom-ba. But you know what I mean. You have Sony Music Group, I think they're still around. These big label conglomerates. And I do believe, for the most part, they have taken advantage of these artists for years and years and decades. So a lawsuit does not shock me a bit. So Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit are suing Universal Music Group for $200 million in unpaid royalties. I'll say it one last time. Does not surprise me one bit. And Fred Durst is claiming that they have not seen any money coming in recent years from Universal Music Group. And they have had a resurgence in popularity. I will agree with him on that. I do pay attention, even to bands that I don't like. And if he's telling the truth, and I'm not doubting him, I'm not agreeing with him either, but if his statement is accurate, there's something wrong. They should be getting some money coming in here over the last few years. All right, now we're going to kind of get ready to transition into what usually makes up a big part of News of the World, and that is our touring news. But we do have one or two other things to discuss. First up, we do have one passing in the world of rock and roll, and that would be Jesse Colin Young. The hippie anthem. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm not. I know, I'm not a big hippie guy. Don't feed the hippies. Keep the hippies off my lawn. That type of thing. But Get Together, of course, was a monster, huge hit for that generation. And that was performed, of course, by the Youngbloods, led by Jesse Colin Young. And unfortunately, he passed away here recently. So we pass along our thoughts and prayers to his family, his friends, bandmates, and fans. Bad news, and I'm surprised this kind of flew under the radar even for me. Now, it's not death. We're moving on past that. But in a way, it is. And again, kind of surprised that this isn't getting more press. We're all concerned about Guns N' Roses' new drummer. But I just read a story recently on UltimateClassicRock.com, one of our cherished sources here on the Fortress of Rock, where Kip Winger did an interview recently, and he's basically writing Winger off. How have I not heard about this? How have I not heard about the fact that Winger are getting ready here within the next month to do farewell shows in Japan and in Australia? And the future of Winger here in the U.S. is kind of vague? What? I'm a huge Winger fan. How did I not hear about this? And it's not just Winger Live that we're talking about here. He has come out and he has said there will be no new music coming from Winger ever again. Blows my mind that I did not hear this. He is saying that Seven, which came out a few years ago, great album, by the way. I wouldn't say it's their best, but very, very good. Seven, he is saying, yeah, that's it. That's the final album. So enjoy it, because that's it. Wow. 7 albums. That's it for the career of Winger. Now, they do have a festival show scheduled in 2025 here in the U.S. But beyond that, nothing really set up on the agenda. Worries me, I have to admit, worries me a little bit. And of course, Kip Winger has this passion for classical music. He's been involved in plays, musicals, the stage. So he has other interests musically outside of Winger. So are we going to get an actual formal farewell tour from Winger, or are they just going to fade quickly into that good night? He did say in this interview he wants nothing to do with being like Kiss, which is a segue. Of course, Kiss went on the Endless Farewell Tour, the End of the Road Tour. Nice segue into a very sketchy story about Gene Simmons. Now, of course, Gene Simmons, initially everybody was psyched, everybody was pumped, even though Kiss had called it quits. He was putting together a solo tour, promising to play all these great Kiss hits. 26 dates, he kept adding dates. Couple dates this week, 6 or 7 dates the following week. Well, guess what? Out of the blue, Gene Simmons has postponed 17 of his 26 concerts in 2025. He is postponing them all the way into early 2026. Now, before you ask me, argue with me, he himself, his representatives, have put out there are no health issues involved. We've seen a lot of this, of course, over the years here in the last decade or so. But they are stressing that there are no health issues with Gene Simmons. So why would you take all your fans' money and then turn around fairly quickly and postpone, almost 2/3 of your shows? I think he owes, and I know he won't give it to us because he can be an arrogant jerk. But I think Gene Simmons owes an explanation to his fans as to why he's doing this. Now they're saying, oh, easy peasy, you can get your refunds for your tickets at point of sale. And of course he had this VIP situation going on at all his shows where you could shell out a ton of money. I want to say almost $15,000. I could be wrong. That seems a little much, but I'm not entirely sure I am wrong. But basically, you would spend a ton of money, one person per stop on Gene Simmons' tour to be his roadie. You get to hang out with him. You get I believe you get a signed bass guitar. So maybe I'm not off. Maybe it was close to $15,000. But again, now the people that decided they wanted that once-in-a-lifetime deal and they want to sign up for that, now they're going to have to try to get their money back. Otherwise, they're going to have to wait and hope that this deal won't fall through in 2026. Meanwhile, Mr. Simmons keeps the money, earns interest on the money, gets to pay his bills with the money. So basically, Gene Simmons is acting like Ticketmaster and Live Nation right now. So all I want is I want him to explain the reason for the postponements, the reason for the delay. If it's not health related, you owe it to your fans who bought tickets and spent their hard-earned money on this. You owe the fans an explanation as to why you're doing this, other than you're just trying to hold their money and earn interest on it. Okay, Gene Simmons thinks he's the smartest man in the world. Now he meets his match with the Maestro. I'm calling him out. And I want justice for the fans. They deserve an explanation. Now, unfortunately, we do have touring news that does involve some negative health issues. And that would be, of course, ZZ Top. ZZ Top drummer Frank Beard has had to drop out of the band's current tour due to undisclosed health issues. He is not done. They are not saying he is out of the band for good. They've got a replacement, somebody who's done this in the past. But this is what modern classic rock and roll looks like when it comes to concerts and touring. So basically now ZZ Top is Billy Gibbons and a couple of roadies / techs. Of course, we know Dusty Hill has passed away, and we hope for the best for Frank Beard, of course. But just to make you aware, Frank Beard of ZZ Top will not be playing drums with the band for a while. He is out of their current tour. Now, kind of interesting news for Foreigner. We've talked a lot about Foreigner over the last few years. Of course, they just rightfully so got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But then there was this whole kerfuffle about Who's going to show up? What are they going to get to sing? Just a big mess. And of course, Lou Gramm wasn't very happy because he was being told you don't get to sing, or you only get to sing this song when you want to sing that song. Well, maybe there's been a little bit of fence mending here, because recently down in Clearwater, Florida, Lou Gramm did come on stage and sing 2 songs with the current incarnation of Foreigner. Of course, again, Foreigner does not feature any original members, but they are sanctioned by the band's founder, Mick Jones, so you have to take that for what it is. I've seen them multiple times. They're fine. They're very, very good. But there is a little voice in my brain that says that's not Foreigner, which is kind of true. But I guess it's good to see Lou Gramm jumping on stage, or I guess not jumping on stage, shuffling on stage to sing a couple Foreigner classics with the current band. Now, Journey has had their issues as well. We know all about this, the lawsuits over the years between Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain. How do I say this? The trepidation of new lead singer, I guess, is he really new anymore? Arnel Pineda. Not being able to handle criticism well, being very shy in dealing with the rock star life outside of being on stage. He does a very good job there, but he does not like social media criticism, any of that stuff. But this has nothing to do with any of that. This has to do with Journey having to cut short their show at the Houston Rodeo here recently. They only got through approximately 4 songs. I believe they were in the middle of Don't Stop Believin' when they had to quickly leave the stage, and they could not come back and continue due to an electrical fire underneath the drum riser, which was melting cables, and it made things too difficult in terms of what are you going to have to do to fix everything that was damaged in this fire. Of course, you've got to worry about the fan safety, the band safety, crew safety. So unfortunately, Houston did not get to see much in the way of Journey at the Houston Rodeo. And of course, we got the obligatory social media posts from various members of the band about, yes, we'll come back, Houston. Sorry, there's nothing we could really do about it. And it's understandable, but it still sucks. Because people, I don't believe this was a free event. I believe you still had to pay for tickets. And that's all you get. And I've been there. I've been through performances that were cut short by weather on multiple occasions. Some only cut short by a couple songs. Some getting cut short by 30, 40 minutes. And you don't get your money back. Band comes out, plays a couple songs, and then after that, you're stuck. You are stuck. So, feel bad for the people down in Houston, but that's rock and roll, kids. Then we've got another band with the ongoing saga. This much more recent than Journey, as we have basically seen Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain put their issues to rest, at least for now. But REO Speedwagon, we've had all this going back and forth. And of course, Kevin Cronin and the surviving members of REO Speedwagon, who still have the rights, the financial stake in the band, at odds, and basically saying that's it, REO Speedwagon is done, because Kevin Cronin seems like a nice guy on the surface, but I still think he's a devious man. I do, and this is going to be further proof to justify my take on the fact that, Kevin Cronin looks like he's a really nice guy, and all he cares about is the band and the music, and I don't believe that. I believe he's an egomaniac who has been trying to take control of REO Speedwagon, the name, the creative direction of the band, ever since Gary Richrath fell on hard times and passed away. Here's some proof. So, of course, at the end of 2024, we saw the final shows, supposedly, of REO Speedwagon, because Kevin Cronin was not going to be able to use the name anymore after denying Bruce Hall the chance to come back on stage and rejoin the band. Well, if you happen to be in the area of Champaign, Illinois, June the 14th, the surviving members of REO Speedwagon, I believe there's 6 of them. And if I'm missing somebody, if there are other surviving members that aren't involved here, I apologize, but from what I can tell, this looks like every surviving member of REO Speedwagon except for Kevin Cronin. Bruce Hall, from the classic High Infidelity lineup, let's put it that way. Bruce Hall's going to be there. Alan Gratzer, the drummer, who has not played with REO for a long time, is coming back for this. Neil Dowdy, of course, keyboard player, coming back for this, along with 3 other members. I believe the bass player, who was eventually replaced by Bruce Hall, is going to be there. So there's definitely no ill will there. So 6 former members of REO Speedwagon are going to reunite for a charity concert benefiting cancer research. That you'll have to look on their website or do some digging to see specifically what cancer research organization the money's going to be going to. I know it is backed by REO Speedwagon, but don't you find it odd that all these other former members of REO Speedwagon get along and are more than willing to get back together on stage just for one time only? Again, Neil Dowdy retired from the road a few years back. Alan Gratzer hasn't been playing music live in a while. But 3 of the 5 classic members, the High Infidelity era REO Speedwagon, are getting back together, along with 3 members from before that, going back into the 70s. Gary Richrath he's passed away. He can't participate. And they will pay tribute to him at this show. So Kevin Cronin is the odd man out. What does that tell you? How does that look? In this case, I don't think appearances are deceiving. I'm just saying. I've always had this feeling about Kevin Cronin. I do not like the power ballads. I appreciated the more raw, rock and roll oriented REO Speedwagon from the mid to late 70s in through the early 80s. And then Kevin Cronin decided, Keep on Loving You, which we'll talk about later. Such a big hit. We need to do more ballads. We need to slow things down. And then we got the ultimate, terrible, awful power ballad, Can't Fight This Feeling, one of the worst songs ever recorded by a major rock band. And at that point I knew there was a power struggle going on with an REO Speedwagon, and Kevin Cronin was to blame. Harumph. All right, let's wrap up our concert news real quick. Our weekly, it seems like weekly Eagles update. The Eagles have added 4 more dates at the Las Vegas Sphere. Now, interesting enough, for our purposes here on the Fortress of Rock, these dates are in September. It's probably a little late for us to hope that, because now there's going to be a huge gap over the summer here. I know Dead and Company, I believe, just started another residency at the Sphere. I know the Backstreet Boys are playing the Sphere. It's probably a little too late to hope that the Eagles in this between period from when they ended their residency to when they're going to restart it could do some dates during the summer across the U.S. and give the Maestro one final chance to go out and see them. Yes, I will pay $150 for a ticket. Okay, I'll do it. Just give me one more chance, please. God, I can't believe I'm begging to the ultra greedy Don Henley. But I am. I'll never get to see Tom Petty. At least give me one last chance to see the Eagles. Please. Steve Winwood. Steve Winwood has scheduled 11 dates in September on the East Coast. North American dates technically, because I love when these bands schedule a concert in Niagara Falls, it's technically in Canada. So when I see that, I have to qualify it and say these are North American dates, not U.S. dates. So Steve Winwood has scheduled 11 North American dates in September, primarily in the East Coast of the United States. Collective Soul. You know, that's one of our favorite bands here on the Fortress of Rock. Collective Soul is joining forces with Live, who, of course, we saw last year. Last year we reviewed that for you here on the Fortress of Rock, along with Stone Temple Pilots. Great show. So now it's Collective Soul and Live out on tour in 2025. Late summer tour, July and August. 30 U.S. dates. So plenty of chances to get out there and see Collective Soul and Live. That sounds like a fantastic show. The Steve Miller Band, still out there. Just a handful of dates in August, but the Steve Miller Band, just like Steve Winwood, playing on the East Coast of the U.S. 6 dates recently scheduled for the Steve Miller Band. Once again, East Coast of the United States in August of 2025. Def Leppard has also added a few more dates onto their U.S. itinerary. 7 dates in total throughout the summer. They're kind of scattered all over the place, these 7 shows. And that not only includes the actual months when they're playing, but who they're playing with. I believe one of the dates features Extreme as the opening act. Couple dates with Bret Michaels, couple dates with the Struts. And by the way, kind of sort of tying into this, mentioning Bret Michaels, Ricky Rocket came out here recently and said there is indeed, and Bret Michaels discussed this before, so this isn't necessarily breaking news, but Bret Michaels, Ricky Rocket, CC DeVille, Bobby Dahl will be getting together for a Poison tour in 2026. It is all but confirmed. Then finally on the concert front, to wrap things up here in a very long, very full News of the World segment. If you're over in Europe, or you want to fly over to Europe, or you're going to vacation over in Europe, specifically in May or July of this year, you have a shot possibly maybe of seeing Robert Plant playing along with one of the backing bands that he uses from time to time, Saving Grace. Robert Plant and Saving Grace playing in Europe, once again, May and July of this year, 20 dates. So again, I don't get really farther east than Fort Wayne, Indiana, so I'll leave the traveling, the world traveling, the European dates, the European concerts to you kids out there. Have at it. But that's going to do it, as I mentioned, for News of the World. Going to be a very odd balance here this week. Of course, News of the World has taken up a lot of time. Breakdown, not so much. Then we'll have kind of a normal, back to normal segment 3. I want to go back and segment 4, wrap it up. We're going to do things a little bit differently here on Breakdown. That's not to say we're not reviewing new music. We are. We're reviewing an album and 2 songs. But the album review is going to be a little brief. It is not going to be our usual detailed breakdown of each and every track on the album. And then when it comes to the 2 new songs, I'm not going ballistic, let's put it that way, but I am instituting a ban on these 2 bands. I will not be reviewing music from these 2 bands anymore on the Fortress of Rock until further notice. I am putting an embargo, a Fortress of Rock embargo on these 2 bands because I can't do it anymore. I can't take it. I keep giving them chances and chances and chances, and I have 2 completely different sentiments about these 2 bands. One I love, but I can't take it anymore, and one I despise, so I'm fine with kicking them out of the Fortress of Rock for the immediate future. So without further ado, let us get into Breakdown, our tribute to the late, great Tom Petty and his Heartbreakers. So the instrumental album that we are going to briefly review this week on the Fortress of Rock, by the way, this is episode 188, dropping on March the 21st, 2025, right in the middle of March Madness for all you sports fans out there. Rick Emmett, of course, you guys know by now, I am a massive, huge Triumph fan. Just a shame they never got back together for more than a couple concerts over the years. Would have loved to have heard more new music from them. It seems like, by all accounts, they still get along fairly well. But I just think they want to do their own things, especially lead guitarist, co-lead vocalist, Rick Emmett. Now, we've been talking about this over the last couple months. He's put out a unique combo package type book CD deal. It is called 10 Telecaster Tales. Now, from what I can tell, the book is basically about his approach, his methodology to playing guitar. So it is really, again, I'm making a minor assumption here from just reading blurbs and things on Amazon, but this is more for the diehard guitar player, really. And that's fine. That's cool. Not a big fan of how he packaged the book with the CD, because he did put together 10 instrumentals, 10 Telecaster Tales, packaged them with the book, but really, I mean, jacked the price up ridiculously, limited the amount you could get, that you could purchase here in terms of overall quantity of this book CD combo. And I know there were a few other bells and whistles involved. But if you really want it, you just want the music like I would, you can go out on Amazon, or I'm sure you can find it on iTunes or your favorite music service, and you can listen to it with your paid music subscription. Or like me, your unpaid music subscription. Or you can actually buy the album digitally and then burn a copy, do whatever you want with it. Very reasonably priced digitally. I believe it's only $9. So I'm still a little bitter about everybody pulling back on CDs. Oh, vinyl, vinyl, vinyl. I'm so tired of the vinyl thing. It's ridiculous. If vinyl still cost what it did back when I was a teenager, then I'd be okay with it. But the fact they're price gouging everybody on vinyl now because the younger generations don't understand that back in the early to mid 80s you could buy albums for $7. Popular new albums. Not $20, not $25, but $7. And now that the pressing capacity has increased for vinyl, I don't understand why the prices aren't coming down. Oh, could it be greed? Sorry. My little tangent is over. For that. Still not done ripping on the music business yet. That comes later. So 10 Telecaster Tales. Let's get into this real quick. Not going to, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm not going to go through track by track. It doesn't make a lot of sense to. This is all instrumental. So how you have to view this, in my opinion, and I'm sure guitar players out there will say I'm a blasphemer, but I would say this about classical music, any jazz, any kind of good instrumental music. If you want to play it in the background while you're doing other things, and it occasionally pulls you away from whatever you're doing, whether it's work, surfing the internet, looking at your emails, and you get those moments that you hear something, you go, wow, that was a really neat moment in that song or that piece. I think that's the whole purpose of instrumental music. So there are 10 instrumentals, of course, duh, on 10 Telecaster Tales. They are So Pushy, Funky Scratchin', Swirling, Alamande, Cowboy and Gaucho Waltz, Slinky, Burleytown Groove, Rio Glide, Gee Whiz, and Winter Nocturne. There were a few that stood out to me. I will say that. I thought, again, we're dealing with instrumentals here. But at least with the structure of the way Rick Emmett put this together, you could argue that they put the two most interesting, strongest instrumentals at the beginning with So Pushy, and especially funky scratching. I also enjoyed Cowboy and Gaucho Waltz a lot. Slinky was very good. The hook in that reminded me, maybe it's just me, but I was always a big fan of Atlanta Rhythm Section. I believe we talked about ARS briefly last week because it was the anniversary of their lead singer, Ronnie Hammond, passing away. But they had a song called Spooky. And this, I'm not saying he ripped it off, but it has distinct echoes of that song. But overall, I think 10 Telecaster Tales, say that 10 times fast, by the way. I think it succeeds in what it's supposed to do, what a good instrumental album is supposed to do. I will listen to it again in the background while I'm working on stuff. I will not shun it just because it's instrumental and there's no actual quote-unquote songs per se. I recommend you guys get out there and listen to this. It's a change of pace. It's something different. Savor some really good guitar work from the great Rick Emmett, again, formerly of Triumph. 10 Telecaster Tales. As far as the book goes, if you're a guitar player, maybe it's something you should explore, something you should look into. Maybe some inspiration, maybe some help on techniques. But in terms of the casual music fan, the die-hard rocker like you and I, it's worth checking out. Definitely worth checking out. So I do recommend 10 Telecaster Tales from Rick Emmett. Now we get into the negative. And I decided to do these two together because I want to get this out of the way. I've been very, very positive lately. If you've been listening to the last few episodes, I have been positive lately, recommending a lot of new songs. Not these two. So, for different reasons, I'll start off with the negative. When I say negative, I mean this is a band I never have really liked all that much. And now I've just gotten further reinforcement on that. And that is the Black Keys. They're supposed to be the saviors of rock and roll. They were. Although the debacle last year with their stadium tour, where tickets weren't selling at all, and they blamed everybody but themselves and their waning popularity, and the fact they're overrated beyond belief, and the two of them come off in interviews like absolute pretentious jerks. None of that could be coming into play at all. Has to be the fans, has to be the promoters, has to be management. So of course they took the time that they would have been touring and they put together another album. So they've got this new album coming out, and I said, okay, they've had a couple good songs. Was it Gold on the Ceiling? That was a great song. But I'm not buying into the critics and they're fawning over the Black Keys, and I'm hearing that they're going to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame someday, which is, again, travesty number 1,427 perpetrated by the idiots who run the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But I said, I will try again. One last time. So the first single from this upcoming new Black Keys album is The Night Before. The first single. Usually the first single is supposed to be brilliant. And a band, at least for a period of time, a year or two, supposed to be the peak of their creative force. This is the best we've got. This album we've been working on for a while, writing and performing it. Usually takes the better part of a year when all is said and done, between the writing, between the recording, the producing, the engineering. So this is supposed to be the best we were able to put together for at least a year, let's say. The Night Before is fluff. It is inconsequential fluff. And again, these two act like, this duo acts like they are rock and roll badasses. And how dare you question our integrity and our chops and our musical ability? I'm looking at the proof, which is their music. And I'm not seeing the greatness that everybody else is seeing. And this new song, The Night Before, just again further solidifies my viewpoint. There is nothing spectacular about this song. It is maybe moderately teeny tiny catchy. Teeny tiny bit catchy. But not really. I don't hear a face-melting guitar solo. I don't hear fantastic drum work. I just hear a little inconsequential fluff piece from a band to me that is now inconsequential. So I am instituting a Fortress of Rock embargo. We will no longer be reviewing anything from the Black Keys until I hear word that they have actually started to live up to this reputation of being new rock and roll gods. We will not waste the Maestro's time. We will not waste your time anymore on the Black Keys. I cannot in any way, shape, or form recommend The Night Before. So they go from negative, a bad song from a band I don't like, to a bad song from a band I really like. But it's rare to see this. But a band that has somehow lost their mojo, lost anything and everything that made them great. And we're talking, whereas the Black Keys are pretenders for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Doobie Brothers are legitimate Rock and Roll Hall of Famers. And everybody, myself included, was so excited when Michael McDonald rejoined the fold. Because then I went back to all those great songs from the 70s and the early 80s. And I thought, here we go. Now they can recapture their magic. Tom Johnston still back with them. Patrick Simmons. Your creative core is there. Now it's back to being intact like it was. Let's go. And now we are 4 songs in terms of what's been released from their upcoming album, and I just say, blech. Blech. I love yacht rock, and I know the Doobie Brothers and Michael McDonald are like the captains of the ship when it comes to yacht rock, especially the latter day Doobie Brothers. What a Fool Believes and Minute by Minute, but I still love those songs. No, they're not as good as Long Train Runnin' or Blackwater. Of course they're not. The band shifted and changed, but was still relevant, still viable. Now I don't know what they are. They're still great in concert. I saw them on the first tour when they got back together with Michael McDonald. They are fantastic. What has happened, though, in the studio? There is no spark. These songs aren't even worthy of being called adult contemporary, let alone yacht rock. They are so boring. And the new song, which is what we're going to be discussing here, is Learn to Let Go. Because even after the first three singles were released, there was still hope. Because Learn to Let Go, the new single, the fourth single, is the first to feature Michael McDonald exclusively on lead vocals since the early 80s. So I'm like, okay. There's some kind of power play going on here, a la REO Speedwagon. Did Michael McDonald need money? He had to beg to come back. Or did they beg him to come back? But they said, hey, but we're the ones that have been with this band. You left. So you can come back, but we're still the big kahunas here. We're in charge. Our songs are going to take precedent. So I'm like, finally, we get a Michael McDonald song. And hopefully pushed by Tom Johnston and Patrick Simmons, you get the Doobie Brothers magic again. Ugh. Learn to Let Go is terrible, terrible, terrible. I know I'm making these sound effects, but I can't put into words how dull the Doobie Brothers have become. I mean, this is the kind of stuff I would expect quality-wise from Mariah Carey or Celine Dion. Stuff that I would never even consider listening to because it is so cookie-cutter, generic, dull. Of course, there might be a couple of you out there going, oh, I love Mariah Carey. She's got a great voice. So does Celine Dion. You can have them. And you can take the Doobie Brothers now in their current art incarnation with you. Because I can't take it anymore. And I'm going back to the last Doobie Brothers album where Michael McDonald hadn't yet come back as a full member in terms of recording with them in the studio. And that album, Liberté, was dull as dirt as well. But once again, I was fooled thinking with Michael McDonald back, that'll spark something. That'll get something going here. Nope. And to quote a good band, The Who, I won't get fooled again. So as much as I admire and love the past Doobie Brothers, this new Doobie Brothers ain't cutting it for me. So I am also placing the Doobie Brothers on embargo here at the Fortress of Rock. Learn to Let Go. I cannot recommend it. It is terrible. Stay away from it. And I will not be reviewing the new album or any further new releases from the Doobie Brothers until I have been told by multiple reputable sources that they've gotten better, which I don't think is going to happen given their age. So that's going to do it for Breakdown. So I got that negativity out of the way. Hopefully next week when we get back to reviewing some better songs, you will be welcoming back the sunny, happy Maestro. And by the way, I don't normally do this. I don't like to cross streams, which is ironic since we're getting ready to hop in the rock and roll DeLorean. But just to make sure there's no confusion, maybe every once in a while, I'm not sure if I've done it yet on this episode, I might end up accidentally referencing the other podcast I do. So let me just right now point out that I do another podcast called Sports Frenzy 2.0. It's actually 2 episodes a week. Thursday mornings, we do a sports edition, since it's called Sports Frenzy 2.0. And then we do a pop culture edition every Saturday morning. So if I make the occasional slip and accidentally reference Sports Frenzy when I should be saying the Fortress of Rock, I am sorry. I'm not trying to cross-pollinate and advertise for my other podcast. But if you want to listen to my other podcast, you can find it the same places where you find the Fortress of Rock. Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, CastBox, Audible, and Good Pods. So I got that out of the way. How about that? Now I'm going to wander over to the garage here at the Fortress of Rock. Hop in the rock and roll DeLorean. Oh, Crossing Streams. I screwed that up, didn't I? Crossing Streams is Ghostbusters, not Back to the Future. Man, I'm on a roll here, aren't I? Doc Brown giving me the stink eye on that one. As he climbs into the driver's seat, I strap myself in to the passenger side in the rock and roll DeLorean, and we head out to the rock and roll time stream for segment 3, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. I want to go back. So I just took care of a little bit of business as we pull out into the time stream. Doc Brown getting us up to 1.21 gigawatts. Just got a couple other things to quickly address. And then we will look back at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, and significant moments in rock and roll history. So I already told you the podcast platforms where you can find the Fortress of Rock. Don't forget to check out the Facebook page. The Facebook page, great stuff on the weekends. Sunday afternoon is New Music Sunday, where I will post a link to a video of a new song. Could be a fully produced video, could be a lyric video, could be a visualizer. But we've got to keep new music alive, keep these artists, these performers, these bands creating. And the way to do that is to give them hits and views on Spotify or iTunes, or in this case, YouTube. Not quite sure yet what this coming Sunday's New Music Sunday video will be, but I got time on that. What I don't have time for, because I've already dropped it, it's done, because it has to be out there right around the same time as the new episode, Friday night, of the Fortress of Rock podcast, is your weekend. It is your new, latest weekend rock project. See how I fixed that? I kind of made it work. I'm still thrown off by the fact I screwed up my pop culture references between Ghostbusters and Back to the Future. That's unforgivable. Shame on the Maestro. Friday nights, the Weekend Rock Project. It is out there. It has already dropped. This is where I give you a word, a phrase, an idea, a theme, and you come back with your favorite, your best, your greatest rock songs that fit that word, that idea, that phrase. This weekend, an old friend of mine, about a month or two back, gave me an idea. And I gave him credit for it. He knows. I gave him credit for it. It just took until now for me to fine-tune it and polish it up so it would be presentable for all of you kids out there. So this week's Weekend Rock project is I want your best, your favorite songs with a piece of clothing or a piece of clothing in the title. This should be really easy. If you think about it for 2 seconds, this should be really easy for you guys out there. With your trained rock and roll brains, this should be easy. It's so easy, I usually only put out one song to kickstart everything. I put out 2 songs this weekend. I picked Slit Skirts by Pete Townshend, and then of course I put out the instrumental, not Rick Emmett, but maybe kind of sort of in tribute to Rick Emmett, and of course in tribute to the late great Eddie Van Halen. I picked off of Van Halen 2, Spanish Fly. Get it? Fly, button fly jeans. Get it? How it works? So I picked one that's actually featuring a piece of clothing, and then one that featured part of a piece of clothing. So there you go. Now I have given you as much assistance as I can. Get out there, put your 2 cents in. Give us your selections for the Weekend Rock Project. Again, exclusively on the Fortress of Rock Facebook page. And then I already mentioned one of my main sources. Earlier on, I mentioned Ultimate Classic Rock, a great website for up-to-the-minute rock and roll news. Next to us, they're the best. But see, I take what they give us and I distill it, and I give you extra opinions and extra insight. Because we've got to get our thoughts, thumbs up, thumbs down, that person's awesome, that person stinks. It's great to report the straight news, but we're a podcast where we need to dissect and analyze all of this rock and roll news. So at least the bare bones come from ultimateclassicrock.com, as well as thisdayinmusic.com and the Van Halen newsdesk.com. Of course, one of our sources for that early news in this podcast involving Alex Van Halen and Steve Lukather diving in to the Van Halen vault. All right, so that now will lead us into I Want to Go Back. Doc Brown says we're up to speed, so let's do it here. Start off with birthdays for March the 21st. A band I saw within the last few years. I'm not a big fan, but March the 21st, 1980. The birthday for Derek Whibley. By the way, Derek Whibley was married at one point to Avril Lavigne, who was also married to Nickelback's Chad Kroeger. She's since divorced from both. What does that say about Avril? Sorry, I digress. Born on this day in 1980, Derek Whibley. He is the vocalist for Sum 41. Born on this day, March the 21st, 1951. A band that I should listen to more. I got into them when they were somewhat big. They've never really been hugely popular outside of La Bamba. But I didn't listen to La Bamba. I listened to Will the Wolf Survive? I mean, Los Lobos had some really good stuff early on in their career. Now, I don't know. They're still around. They're still touring. I'm not trying to judge what they've been doing lately, but nobody gives them any airplay along with dozens and dozens of other bands. But I need to get my old Los Lobos CDs out and listen to those a little bit more often, because they are a great band. Born on this day, March the 21st, 1951, the bass player for Los Lobos, Conrad Lozano, was born. Born on this day, March the 21st, 1950, one of the co-founders and lead singer for Supertramp, Roger Hodgson, was born on this day in 1950. Of course, Supertramp had a nice little run there for about 4 or 5 years where they were, I think they were one of the biggest bands in the world. They never seemed to get that credit. Going from basically, Crime of the Century through Breakfast in America and beyond. So once again, born on this day in 1950, co-founder, lead vocalist for Supertramp, Roger Hodgson, born on this day. The man we named this segment after. Born on this day, March the 21st, 1949. The late, the great Eddie Money. Born on this day again in 1949. Then finally in birthdays, March the 21st, 1945. Rose Stone. Vocalist, piano player for, of course, Sly and the Family Stone. She was born on this day in 1945. Moving on to anniversaries for March the 21st. Now this is where I'm going to take a few minutes and go off again on the music business. And I actually did some digging and did some research. You guys know how much I used to care about the Billboard charts and how much of a farce they are now. This anniversary, despite the fact that it involves country music, which we normally don't talk a lot about here on the Fortress of Rock, I had to bring this up. This is just a few years ago. March the 21st, 2023. 36 songs from Morgan Wallen's album, One Thing at a Time. Yes, that would be every single track on the album. 36 songs from Morgan Wallen's One Thing at a Time were in Billboard's Hot 100. I cannot stress to you how idiotic and how stupid that is. Because I look at that and I go, you have now changed things irreparably in terms of comparing chart records. Because you're just going to go by how many streams you get on Spotify. So somebody who sat down, I'm not disparaging the popularity of Morgan Wallen, okay? But what I'm saying is you can't compare what Billboard's charts have been over the last 27 years, because I believe roughly 1998 was when they started to make these massive wholesale changes to the Hot 100. I think they changed, again, I did research on this when I saw this anniversary was going to pop up on March the 21st for today's show. They changed it from singles to songs on the Hot 100, which meant that radio airplay did not matter anymore. Declaring a song as a single did not matter anymore. So what they basically said was, if somebody goes and listens to a Taylor Swift album, if somebody goes and listens to a Morgan Wallen album on a streaming service, you're going to count that as one play for every single song on the album and project that onto the Hot 100, which is idiotic. It is asinine. Can you imagine some of the albums, some of the classic albums? Imagine if those rules had been in place for the Beatles. Imagine if those rules had been in place for Led Zeppelin in the 70s. Or some of the classic albums in the early 80s like Journey's Escape or Def Leppard's Pyromania or AC/DC's Back in Black. Every song on that album would have been at the top of the Billboard charts. Tell me I'm wrong, and I defy you to prove it, that I'm wrong on that. So Morgan Wallen and Taylor Swift and everybody now over the last couple decades get to play under these new set of rules and get to set all these new chart records like this idiocy. And again, I'm not ripping on Morgan Wallen. I'm ripping on the system. I'm ripping on Billboard. How can you compare this record from Morgan Wallen set in 2023 on this day to anything from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s? You can't. It's like a sports analogy would be like it's baseball. You got the guys who they won't put in the Hall of Fame because they cheated and they used steroids. And nobody's saying they weren't great players. Barry Bonds probably would have been in the Hall of Fame if he hadn't taken steroids or performance-enhancing drugs. It doesn't change the fact that he did. And if you look at these two eras of Billboard, vastly different. And you can't compare the chart successes from the 60s, 70s, and 80s to what we're seeing now, because it's not apples and oranges. It's apples and potatoes. I mean, it's apples and asparagus. It's so different. So different that there should be a delineation. There should be a strict break from 1998 before and 1998 after, when they made this stupid distinction between singles and songs. And I understand radio is not important like it used to be, and streaming is more important, but there should be somebody with half a brain at Billboard to figure out a balance. And I've said it and I'll say it again. This is not, maybe not explicitly, but it is implicitly destroying rock and roll. Okay, ran over. Let's continue on with our anniversaries for March the 21st. On this day, March the 21st, 1994, Bruce Springsteen won an Oscar for Best Original Song for Streets of Philadelphia. On this day, March the 21st, 1991, Leo Fender died. And of course, we've been talking a lot about guitar work on this episode. Leo Fender, how do you not know the name Fender Guitars? But Leo Fender, of course, responsible for the Telecaster, the Stratocaster, arguably the two most important guitar models ever created. So once again, on this day in 1991, the legendary Leo Fender died. On this day, March the 21st, 1984, in tribute to John Lennon, in Central Park, New York City, of course, Strawberry Fields opened. I went on my rant about REO Speedwagon, and I told you I was not done with them yet. On this day, March the 21st, 1981, REO Speedwagon had the #1 song in the U.S. with Keep On Lovin' You. And then finally, on March the 21st, 1964, the Beatles had the number one song in the United States with She Loves You. And there you go. That will do it for I Want to Go Back. Doc Brown has got us all turned around. He is pulling us back into the garage at the Fortress of Rock, pulling the drawbridge up over the moat. I'm going to head back to the studio for our final few minutes, a little segment we like to call Wrap It Up, which of course is our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. We've looked at present day classic rock in our first segment and our second segment, News of the World and Breakdown. We've looked at the past now with I Want to Go Back. Now it's time to look to the future with Wrap It Up. Our Fortress of Rock crystal ball, if you will. Now, I mentioned earlier, we're going to start getting back into structuring future episodes a little bit more now that we have some new music, some new albums on the horizon. Now, next week, we are going to just kind of do a handful of songs, positive reviews for the most part. We got rid of all the negativity this week with the Doobie Brothers and with the Black Keys. We got rid of the negativity. Let's get back into some positive stuff. So next week we're going to do a bunch of songs for episode 189, dropping on March the 28th, 2025. Most of these are holdovers from what we talked about last week. We've got Bryan Adams, Make Up Your Mind, which is the second release of his upcoming album, Roll with the Punches. We talked about this band D-Raps that sound uncannily at times, especially the guitar work, like Van Halen. Their second album is on the horizon. The first release from that album is last fall. LA Guns, their new album coming up in a few weeks. That is Leopard Skin. The second single from that album, I cannot say it, as we try to keep things clean here on the Fortress of Rock so the kids will listen. Let's just say the title is Lucky MFer and leave it at that. That's going to be fun to try to do a full review of next week, by the way. And then finally, Craig Finn of the Hold Steady, his latest solo album coming out in a few weeks. Second single from that is Bethany. Now, those songs we already talked about over the last week or two. One song that did hit the radar this week for the first time, David Lee Roth is back again. He is just loving the ability to put all this new music on YouTube. He is taking advantage of YouTube as a creative outlet. So good for him. Sometimes I have problems figuring out, is he doing just a comedy bit or is he actually doing a song? So this one's an actual song. So we do have a new song from David Lee Roth called Alligator Pants. So those 5 songs, if not all of them, most of them will be reviewed next week on the Fortress of Rock. Along with, is Doc Brown out of earshot? We're going to put Doc Brown to work again, like we did a few weeks ago. Do a little bit of extra work as we go back in time, not only to look at the history of rock and roll, but we're going to do a look back at an old album from my youth. Of course, another bad movie reference there with My Cousin Vinny. I hope I didn't mess that one up. But We started to do this where when we don't have a new album to review every couple weeks, we're going to go back and listen to a classic album that I overlooked, that you guys probably overlooked or didn't give enough credit to. Maybe you listened to one song on the radio, said that's cool, but I really don't have time to get into the album. And that's what we're trying to do now when we get Doc Brown to take us out a little bit earlier every once in a while in the Rock and Roll DeLorean. Next week, we will review Y&T, their first album after they jumped ship from A&M Records and moved over to Geffen. That album is contagious. We'll have a review of that for you next week on the Fortress of Rock. In the coming weeks, I teased the fact that maybe, possibly, I will watch the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown. I don't know when, I don't know if, but in 2 weeks on the Fortress of Rock, for sure, episode 190, dropping on April the 4th, 2025, I will break the rules a little bit. Not necessarily a new album, but it's Van Halen, so I don't care what anybody thinks, we're going to review it. And I have been going back and forth on this because I've been seeing news that maybe it was coming out on CD, maybe it wasn't. Now I'm seeing more positive news that yes, indeed, here at the end of March, Van Halen Live in Dallas 1991 will indeed be coming out on CD as a standalone release. So that means in 2 weeks, episode 190, we will review Van Halen Live in Dallas 1991, the free concert they had to give because Sammy Hagar shot his mouth off. His voice was shot at an earlier performance. He promised everybody, we will come back and give you a free concert. I don't think Eddie was very happy about that, but this was the result. In 3 weeks, we just talked about LA Guns. In 3 weeks, we will review the brand new album from LA Guns, Leopard Skin. That would be episode 191, dropping on April the 11th. And then finally, we'll go 4 weeks out like we normally do when we get structured like this. Kind of happy that this is back. Now, in 4 weeks, I've got the possibility of 2 albums. I'm not going to review 2 albums. I'm just not sure at this point, a month out, which one is going to take precedence. It's either going to be the new Craig Finn album, or it's going to be the new album from the Spin Doctors. But one of those 2 albums, and then, of course, the next week, 5 weeks out, will be the other one. That's going to happen on episode 192, dropping April the 18th, 2025. So, that leaves us with the Fortress of Rock charts for March the 21st, 2025. I've already done enough ranting and vitriol spewing about the Billboard charts, so let's keep it brief here. You know, we do these charts every week now. We've been doing them since the beginning of 2024 in direct battle, in direct competition with the incompetence and the idiocy of Billboard. This is more a tribute to the past Billboard charts. America's Top 40 with Casey Kasem. Because we have to run everything, it looks like. Because the people in charge are incompetent and stupid. Take that for what you will. Project that onto whoever you like or dislike in business, at your work, in politics. I don't care. Run with it. I give you permission. The number 1 album this week. Yes, again. Not a lot to choose from. I could have picked 10 Telecaster Tales again by Rick Emmett. It was close, but at the last possible second today, a couple hours before recording, I did listen again to Tremonti's The End Will Show Us How. So once again, that is your top album, your number one album here on the Fortress of Rock charts. Tremonti's The End Will Show Us How. Now, I guarantee in a couple weeks, somehow, some way, that's going to change. Your top songs for the week on the Fortress of Rock. Of course, I always pick a couple because I cheat. It's very hard to pick just one song, so I usually like to pick two. Some repeat offenders here. One from last week, one from a couple weeks ago. Lord Humongous by Black Label Society stays at the top of our charts. Still digging that heavy, heavy rock and roll, kids. And then we go back to the first release from the upcoming The Complete Sweets Butter Miracle album from the Counting Crows, and the first single, Spaceman in Tulsa. So top album, Tremonti's The End Will Show Us How. Top songs, Spaceman in Tulsa by Counting Crows, and Black Label Society's Lord Humongous. There you go. Very, very long, very thorough, very in-depth episode of the Fortress of Rock. I'm sure I made mistakes. Aside from the Ghostbusters Back to the Future debacle, I'm sure there's probably a couple other missteps I made over an hour and 45 minutes. Thanks for hanging a little bit longer than normal this week with me, the Ayatollah of rock and roll of the Maestro, Kevin Cronin. Love talking about classic rock. Love talking about classic rock with you, my awesome audience. We'll do this all again in 7 days. But until then, once again, I am the Maestro, Kevin Cronin. You are who you are. Have fun. Enjoy life. Love the ones you're with. Listen to some great rock and roll, whoever it might be, whatever band, performer you love. Cherish them, enjoy them. We'll talk again in a week. Until then, peace out.